Before we start today's recap and discussion, Barrett and I want to thank you all for listening and watching all season long, for supporting our show. We would love if you'd stick with us after our Succession coverage ends next week. Up next, we will be covering HBO's The Idol, which premieres June 4th, starring Lily Rose Depp. Remember, you can watch every episode of our podcast on youtube.com/@oystersclamscockles if you'd rather watch instead of just listening. And there is no better time than now to join us on patreon.com/oystersclamscockles for as little as $5 to gain access to our entire catalog of Succession bonus content, with an episode driven by hotline calls from listeners for each episode of Succession's final season. So when you sign up today, you'll already have 8 episodes there immediately for you to consume in preparation for the series finale. Follow our show on TikTok @Oysters, Clams, and Cockles, on Twitter @Clams and Cockles, and on Instagram @Oysters, Clams, Cockles. For more from me, Ross Bolin, check out my comedy show, The Ross Bolin Podcast, wherever you consume OCC, and go to bolinmedia.com/shop to get yourself some Succession-inspired hats, t-shirts, coffee mugs, and more. We've got our new Disgusting Brothers World Tour 2023 tee, Kendall Roy crossed out or underlined hats and shirts, Connor Roy 2024 campaign shirts, and more. Thank you, and enjoy today's episode. Welcome back for another helping of Oysters, Clams, and Cockles presented by Bolin Media. I am Ross Bolin, joined today by Mr. Barrett Dudley to discuss Season 4, Episode 9 of Succession, titled Church and State, the penultimate episode of the series, Barrett.
Penultimate. Here it was.
One more left.
You know we love a penultimate here.
We do.
And I love the discord around the penultimate episodes well, because the discord made my dick hoard.
Oh, good joke. good mature joke to start the show. One more left.
Shouts to the Patreon exclusive discord out there.
Oh, good point.
The cord is strong.
Nice tie-in.
Yeah.
That made it worth it.
Yeah.
One more left. Only one episode remains. I am truly not ready. I see you brought your sunglasses today. That's smart. You can cry in secret.
That's right.
Hide all your emotions, and thus emerge victorious as the winner of the podcast. Let's dive in and digest what we saw last night in episode 9, what we'll probably forever refer to as the funeral episode.
I think that's accurate.
All right. We start out with Shiv getting dressed for her father's funeral and watching the news, ATN news specifically. I thought she might be watching Pierce, but no.
PGN, you mean?
PGN? Yeah, excuse me.
Yeah.
But no, she's watching ATN.
Gotta keep your eye on the ball.
Yeah, and they're covering the presidential election. They're discussing the fact that it's not over, as they are still awaiting the results of absentee ballots. And we find out through the news that Jimenez supporters are demonstrating and protesting around the country, including outside the Manhattan offices of ATN, who, as ATN News proudly notes, first called the election for Jared Mankin. Shiv does not look very pleased with that distinction, and she ends up talking to Matsson on the phone. She reminds him to get his India numbers out today because this is an amazing day to bury bad news. And Matsson is unsure, though, and he throws this age-old adage at Shiv: if you have a little dicky, maybe you don't go to the nudist beach. And Shiv responds, a tsunami just came and washed everything away. No one is checking the dicks. I didn't really get what... He's really hesitant to let these numbers get out there.
Well, it's a scary thing to let out there.
Yeah.
They're not good. He's been fudging them. He's been cooking the books. There aren't 2 Indias. There's only one India.
That's true. There is only one India.
So
which is problematic for him.
Yeah.
Matsson also asks how they're going to get around Mankin, and when Shiv expresses her doubts about Mankin becoming president, Matsson responds, well, you've been a democracy for like 50 years, unless you don't count black people, which is kind of a bad habit. So, and she pushes back that it's a little more complicated than that, and he closes with, you are nearly as mature a democracy as Botswana. The Redcoat writers just could not pass up the opportunity to shit all over America here, Barrett.
I thought that was interesting, too, because it's actually like one of my favorite factoids that I love to toss out to people, as America generally like hurtles towards the end of its run, I would say. Not in the next 5 years, I'm not saying that, but like it's happening next 20 to 50, I would say. So I'm sitting here talking much like Matsson about like, will France make it, right? I put America in that same boat. Anyway, it's actually the oldest democracy in the world.
The United States.
The United States is. And these things typically don't last for more than 200 to 300 years. You know, like Roman, Ottoman empires, like all these like crazy, like super long civilizations that ruled the world for, you know, centuries. It was 2 or 3 centuries. It wasn't like 1,000 years. It wasn't 500. So it was like an interesting rub there because he is saying it's a young democracy, and actually it's the oldest one there is.
Yeah, I think his point is that if you count when it actually became truly democratic and that women and people of all races and colors could vote, that it's not old.
Right.
And
quite an interesting wrinkle, actually, and not one that I'd factored in myself. So it's valid. It's a valid note, but it's historically somewhat inaccurate.
Yeah, and I think his impression is that because we, in his eyes, are so young, that we're malleable, that like it can be still very easily manipulated, and that anybody could end up winning this election, and he needs to buddy up with Mencken as a result. But just a really interesting conversation there between Shiv and Matsson to start off the episode. And then in his own penthouse atop a skyscraper, Roman Roy is also watching ATN News, and he seems pleased with reports of street violence and intimidation occurring as a result of the election. It is noted on the news that NYPD urges the public to only join officially arranged and marshaled protests for their safety. And it's just like an interesting note that Roman was fully aware of the dangers on the street early in this episode, right?
Yes.
Before even going down there to get into his car or whatever, which obviously adds a bit of masochism and self-harm to the way this episode closes out, right? Mm-hmm. Tease you up for that early on. He kind of paces around his penthouse with his pink note cards, practicing his eulogy speech, which we'll all remember he volunteered to do at the tailgate party in episode 7. And it starts out with, "My father, Logan Roy, was a great man in the truest sense of the word. Born the middle child of 3, he was sent away during the Second World War to Bing Bang Bong. Sad, sad, sad. I look good. I look good. I am the man. I am the man. As you can see here, I am talking loudly about my father, and don't I perhaps remind you of him just a little?" And, you know, we obviously get some insight into what the contents of Roman's speech will be, but also, more importantly, what he hopes to get out of it. Right? He wants people to see him crush this and think, wow, Roman reminds me of Logan. Maybe we should give him all the power at Waystar. He is the heir apparent, right? That's sort of that's the path he sees himself on here.
Sometimes the logic that the people in the show have is pretty insane. Like,
it's not very bright.
What about crushing the funeral speech would make people be like, you know what? I've changed my mind. He should be the CEO of Waystar.
Despite everything I've seen about and know about this kid, you know what? Now I see him as Logan.
I mean,
yeah.
and then it does kind of like it sort of plays out that like when Kendall takes over the speech and kind of sort of crushes it. I'm not actually sure. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
It does like gain him a little little feather in his cap, but it's just weird to be like going into the funeral. And Roman obviously talks about how he wants to win the funeral. He's very candid about that. But just a funny jump in logic that like by you Googleizing this man, you know, the best way, the just doing the very best you Googly, he's going to also become CEO.
Yeah. He continues ranting to himself.
That's a Zoolander reference, by the way.
Oh, yeah,
I also know that it is eulogy.
Yes. He puts lotion on his face. He declares himself King Dong and the King of Dong and brags that he selected the president. He says, see Shivy cry, see Kenny lie, see Roman the showman light up the sky. And this was another episode that was pretty tough to watch from front to back, and this scene with Roman practicing his speech causing us to both deal with the awkwardness of knowing he is probably going to bomb come game time, and also seethe with anger because this little prick thinks he can just pick the president. It did a great job of warming up the old emotions for the rest of the ride. Like, just
I'll we also went into this episode with some questions about like they had kind of teed this little piece of it up for us in the, you know, next time on Succession. And so you're kind of like wondering like, okay, is he gonna like, is this Roman's big rise? Is he brimming with confidence and now he's gonna own this this funeral and the eulogy, and now he's going to be like, and he's going to bury his sister and his brother, and like, is this Roman's time to take off? The fact that they plant this all happens right at the beginning of the episode, tells you that that's not how it's going.
No, once I saw him practicing in the mirror, I was like, oh, he's so screwed. This is going to be so bad. It was just like, I had like, my stomach sunk. Kendall calls Roman from the car and asks if he can get Mencken to tone it down a little, likely in terms of like celebrating and making outlandish claims in the media, right? And during their conversation...
Stoking the fires, I'm sure. Yeah.
As they do.
Dog whistling, etc.
We get shots of the street from Kendall's perspective as he's driving along, right? We see heavy police presence, barricades being set up everywhere, windows and storefronts being boarded up, like sketchy Antifa types, like prepping, like meeting on the sidewalk and whatnot. Clearly tensions are running high in NYC. From the get-go here. So next, Kendall gets a call from Rava, who is, again, extremely freaked out with the political climate. She tells Kendall she is taking the kids upstate to Travis and Roberts for safety. I assume those are like her brothers or something. And Kendall freaks out. He hangs up on her, tells Fikret, his driver, I want to be at Rava's in 3 minutes. Okay, I'll figure out fines and violations. Just get us there now. And he pulls up just as Rava is getting the kids into the car and just goes nuts on her. He accuses her of being too online and losing context, and he's like knocking on the windows of the car and like yanking on the door handles, threatening to go to court to get an emergency court order to stop her from leaving the city, saying he's going to lay down in front of her car and they're going to have to run him over if they want to leave. Remember when Shiv told Kendall he was a good dad? Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't very accurate, was it?
Yeah, he's, it's always tough to watch Kendall with Rava because he's always like full of this bluster, which you kind of know is a little bit impotent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's just a turd,
like,
man.
He's not,
the guy sucks.
He's not, there's no way that he's laying down in his $9,000 Loro Piana jacket in front of that car. You know what I mean?
In traffic.
Like, it's just all a bunch of,
Come on.
He's kind of a windbag here. And like it's full of maybe this good intention to like be there for his kids and like want to have that relationship, and yet at the same time it's just like it reads so sourly.
I mean, it's not. Like, that's the thing. There's no good intention. She is trying to protect her children from what she sees as an extremely dangerous situation. Yeah. She doesn't want the kids at the funeral because she's scared, frankly, that something terrible is going to happen at the funeral. And this jackass. It's just about image to him.
Right.
How could he not have his kids at their grandfather's funeral? So it's hard to watch because he's such a, like, it's the way he is most like his dad. Mm-hmm. That he just, when push comes to shove, it's all about what he wants and his own shit, his own personal selfish desires. And he's not even able to be full Logan with it. Like, Rava doesn't take him seriously. She's sad for him. And she's sad that I think that the kids can't be at the funeral to watch their grandfather go and to grieve properly. But at the same time, I think it's an easy call for her. Like, well, they're not going to this. Look around. Look at the chaos out here.
Notable that he gets so manic in front of the kids, and he's ripping on the door handles and all that as well. And
he's
then, like,
scaring the children.
You talk about how he's Logan-esque in these moments, and then Shiv goes on to describe the story about how terrifying their father was when they were little kids, just like hanging out.
They were always scared of him.
Yeah, and I think that definitely kind of plays here. Is like, if you're in the car, if you're the kids in the car, your dad is freaking you.
This is trauma.
Freaking you out right now.
This episode did a lot of showing you the cycle of trauma continuing. What Logan did to these kids, now they're going to do to their kids. There's a lot of joking with Shiv about how with her baby, like she's not even going to, you know what I mean?
I guess the poison drips through.
It does drip through, it turns out. So, yeah, tough scene here with Kendall, and really just like, like I've said last week, the week before that, they did a good job earlier on in the season of like making you pick sides and kind of rooting for people again and say, oh, look, Kendall looks sober this season. Why? He's just trying to stay focused. He smoked horse. He needs something to really consume him. And by the end of the season here, you're just sort of reminded how terrible they all are. Kendall in particular. He's just a terrible, terrible human being. Tom and Greg go over a newspaper, I believe it is, that like breaks down the controversial call at ATN. And just in order of appearance on there, they've got like Roman Roy at the top as Waystar Royco co-CEO. And he's next to Darwin Perry, director of ATN's decision desk. Shiv is below Roman and is labeled president of Waystar Royco. Kendall is below Shiv, and then Connor is below Kendall. And Tom is not pleased with his role in this selection being diminished, right? In the selection of Mencken. Yeah, he's like, why be on the team if you're not going to get the credit, right? Like, he sees that he has put himself in a pretty precarious position in terms of society and societal views, and he's not even getting, his face up there with the big dogs, which just kind of makes him even more of a lackey, right? Tom says he's supposed to be a wheelman for Logan's casket, front right, and tells Greg he's going to be late. He's got to stay here. Traffic is through the roof. Darwin might resign. He's upset with the way that he's being portrayed, and so he's got to stay at the office. And he wants Greg to get him a second row.
Yeah,
excuse me.
Certified grind boy, Tom.
Yes.
Tom
yeah.
Womsgans.
Yeah, he's really all in here.
Womsgans.
Womsglands. Kendall, Roman, and Shiv ride together to the funeral, but they're in like gridlock traffic. It turns into an incredibly awkward car ride very quickly. Shiv tells her brothers that she's pregnant, and this is when you really start to see we've already seen it, but Roman is a mess. He's like, he asks if it's his. He says that he thought Shiv had just been eating her feelings, says if she breastfeeds in front of him, he's going to have to jerk off because it will be hot, and then asks if they should bone again and create kid number 2.
He's just being like top tier Roman D-bag, which is just, again, just more and more like setting him up for
the fall. Yeah.
For the fall, because it's just like, it's all of his over the top, over sexualized, like hijinks. He drops like a few of his little his little Roman giggles in there.
Yeah, but it's like the most inappropriate version of it we've ever heard. Probably.
Yeah, I don't know if he's gone full. I feel like we've heard an incest joke before.
Oh, he definitely has made incest jokes.
So, it's
but
not
to his pregnant sister. It's just like, there's another level. It was really disturbing. I mean, you're just kind of like, oh my God. At least before, when he was making those jokes, you could like really read like, well, that was a joke.
Yeah.
And this, you're almost like, is he serious right now? What is wrong with this guy?
Also wanted to note the strange Cadillac town car limo thing that they're in with 3 doors, but then like, it's not like a full. It's just like they've basically just extended a Cadillac sedan to have another row to have another row, which you can enter via a middle door.
Yeah.
Just a funny looking limo set up there.
It was very strange.
Clearly existed. I mean, it's not like that. It's not like they CGI'd that caddy.
No.
So that's a thing. It just looked interesting.
It did. Jess calls and informs the trio that protesters have essentially shut down FDR, so they're going to need to meet up with her and walk the rest of the way. Like, getting there by vehicle is no longer an option. So they do that, and when Kendall gets out and puts on his sunglasses, Roman mocks him and says now he can cry in secret and hide all of his emotions and thus emerge victorious as the winner of the funeral, just further queuing up Roman's eventual downfall here. But Kendall tells Jess that early next week he wants to speak with some family lawyers about getting custody of his kids. Again, this is what makes him, like, it's just, there's no way you can have sympathy for him at this point. Like, he's trying to take custody of Rava's children from her because she wanted to protect them in what she sees as a dangerous circumstance. And as he starts to like go through his calendar and his phone to schedule this, he sees a meet with Jess set up that she clearly wasn't prepared to talk about yet. It turns out she wants to move on from her position as Kendall's assistant. Kendall basically forces this out of her, then takes it very personally. He asks Jess if it's about Mencken, which it clearly partially is, and you'll remember that Jess tried to stop Greg from going to do the Mencken thing.
Yeah.
But she says she's been thinking about it for a while. He tells her he's given her extraordinary access that she's not going to get anywhere else, which, I mean, he can't even come up with good shit to say. Like, that's like, what, the extraordinary access to seeing what a psycho you are and like picking up after you and shit?
I mean, even a few weeks ago, we just kind of like casually mentioned Jess and, how that she's kind of like a low-key all-star, just like constantly everywhere all the time, doing all of the things. She never takes vacation. She never gets a break. It's like, I don't know, like, it seems like the type of job that you do for 3 or 4 years.
And then you expect to move up.
You pay your dues, and then you parlay that into like, a nice cushy job and you've got great experience, somewhere else. So Who's to say? In another moment, maybe Kendall would be happy for her and proud to like send her on her way. Probably not, because I feel like he, it feels a little bit entitled to like her staying around for as long as he sees fit.
Yeah.
Which might be forever. But yeah, I loved the little note here, or the little act where like just, 60 seconds after Roman, says, "Oh, Kendall, like, yeah, put your sunglasses on, hide all your emotion." And then he's like, his sunglasses off for the Jess conversation. And then it like gets real and he's clearly hurt by it. And he puts on the sunglasses to walk away. And it's like, very clearly he's like masking the emotion. Like he's been pierced. His armor has been pierced by like the fact that like, he knows, it's like all these little things are like entering him. The board's being put up. Jess not feeling like Rava and the kids getting out of town. Like he knows that this Mencken thing,
it's bad.
Is bad. Was a terrible idea.
Yes, I think his entire reaction with Jess is centered on that.
But it's too late, right? Like now he has to go. He has to go full bore into this. So.
Yeah, and he has to tell himself that, like he tells Jess, that she has no idea how things will turn out. That this is very juvenile. It's fucking dumb. She's being dumb. Everybody's being dumb. Right?
Yeah, the same. Yeah, and very similar rhetoric to what we hear all the time, where it's like, oh, like it's not that bad. Like nothing's really gonna happen. Like what's actually, all this same type of stuff is now like what he's kind of regurgitating, and that like this is, this is not bad. It's not bad. This is all an overblown overreaction, and everybody needs to just like,
chill out
and keep their pants on.
Yeah, it allows him to go on with as little of a conscience as possible, right? Even though he's, again, the one who forced Jess into this conversation. Then after it's all said and done, he's like, nice timing, Jess. Lovely day to tell me about all this and make me have this conversation. As a very busy man who loves binge watching TV and doesn't know how to cook, too often I end up getting unhealthy takeout. Not anymore, thanks to today's sponsor, Factor. Today's episode is brought to you by Factor. If you're too busy to cook, with Factor, skip the trip to the grocery store, skip the chopping, prepping, and cleaning up too. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy, then get back outside and soak up the warm weather. Or let's be real, sometimes you need something healthy to eat while you enjoy your favorite shows from the couch. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up fast with ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and tackle everything on your to-do list. If you want to cut back on takeout, get Factor instead. Not only is Factor cheaper than takeout, but meals are ready faster than restaurant delivery in just 2 minutes. No more waiting an hour and a half for the delivery guy who ends up canceling after deciding to eat your food in his car. Get Factor and enjoy clean eating without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door, ready in just 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. I've been eating these for several weeks now. They're freaking delicious. I literally just got a new box of Factor at my doorstep on the way out of the house to come to the studio. I love the smoothies as well. They're also delicious. Had one every day last week for breakfast. So if you're living life on the fly, I could not more highly recommend Factor. Get a shape for yourself this season. Head to factormeals.com/OCC50 and use code OCC50 to get 50% off your first box. That's OCC50 at factormeals.com/OCC50 to get 50% off your first box. On the way to the funeral, the way into the church, Hugo tells Kendall that Mattson has slipped out his deeply bullshit subscriber numbers from all across South Asia. It's not for Kendall to engage, just for him to know. Obviously, this is information that Kendall would have become privy to at some point anyway. Hugo is just really he's trying to buddy up to Kendall. He wants to be close to him. He's trying to get into his camp, I think. And Connor presents Shiv with his long, hard-to-follow, and formally inventive speech he'd like to give. And Shiv expresses concern that his eulogy could leave them open to legal action, which was one of the funniest lines in the episode. Roman continues burying his grief behind extremely inappropriate and disturbing sexual commentary, calling his widowed stepmother a sexy funeral lady and saying he's going to have sex with her on his dad's coffin. He approaches Frank and attempts to sway him to his side in the event his brother Kendall is no longer interested in becoming CEO. This is the first time we've seen Roman. Like, that's how much momentum he's picked up. With the Mencken thing and the being the eulogy guy, the Googleizer. He is now actually making like a move to try to secure his spot. What does he say? Is he like he'll be the only cherry left
the
on
only
top?
cherry on top of the cake. Yeah.
And Frank is just like,
one king, one crown.
Yeah. Now Roman is making that same play, and Frank has been approached by both of them, and it's just like, oh my God, these fucking idiot kids. Mencken rolls in, and Greg, who is winded from biking to the funeral, asks Roman for an intro to Mencken in exchange for keeping his grandpa Ewan, Logan's brother, away from the microphone. And after their conversation, he says, "Nice trade."
Nice trade. Also just loved the little shot of Greg zooming by on a city bike and then just being drenched in sweat as he enters the funeral.
Yeah, and still catching his breath.
But like, I thought this kind of 10, 15 minutes here was just really like, it kind of makes your skin crawl because it's like, everybody in this room is a jackal, is a hyena. Everybody is here to continue making moves in politic and like glad hand and do side deals and like get their piece and get their taste. And it's just kind of like, it's really gross because at a wedding is one thing.
Right.
You know?
I mean, even then, it's a little bit tacky,
but it's a little tacky then.
This is somehow worse.
But this seems like the one thing where you'd leave it at the door, right? A funeral is the one place where like maybe just like, you know, pay some respects.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But no, none of them do. They are literally inside of the church wheeling and dealing and having all of these like nonsense conversations. And so I think that is very, very intentional, that it's just like we're about to see some real emotion, and yet at the same time, like this is just shitty behavior, just on almost everybody's part.
I mean, that was definitely one of the takeaways, and then the other one is that like this is the world Logan created and left behind, right?
It's true.
Like this is
Logan would probably be doing the exact same thing.
Yeah,
so
this is sort of the mess that he made.
That is a great point.
Speaking of which, we see a real moment of honesty where Frank and Carl and Jerry and Carolina are standing around, and Jerry asks Carl how much of him is glad that Logan is gone. It's just the first time we see anybody like, you know, this guy stunk. Mm-hmm. We lived under his thumb for decades in some cases. And I liked that. I liked that they inserted that little bit of honesty there. Lady Carolyn Collingwood, Kendall and Shiv and Roman's mother, shows up. She notices Shiv is with child, and they hold an entire conversation about that without ever actually saying it or acknowledging it directly, which was just a beautiful piece of Roy, I guess, / Collingwood, you know, communicating there. Yeah. Shiv talks with Matsson about Mencken and broaches the subject of offering up an American CEO to Mencken to color the acquisition in a good light, pitching herself entirely in the third person and implying pretty directly to Matsson that she would operate as his puppet, which just felt sad in a way. I mean, you got to do what you got to do to get the job, I guess.
Yeah.
If you're her.
That's how I took it.
But also, it was a little bit disheartening.
Yeah.
And Matsson tells her that he heard she's pregnant, and Shiv tells him she'll do 36 hours of maternity leave and email through her vanity cesarean, and that the poor kid will never see her, which didn't feel like the best path to motherhood set out there before her.
There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of darkness in this episode. Is all you know, all of the kids are kind of just the worst parts of Logan, and not really any of the not a whole lot of the vim as it would turn out.
That's well said. Matsson also brings up that Mencken and Shiv hate each other. She assures him that she can smooth it over, but that was always like, I mean, the moment she said it, what about an American CEO? And I was like, oh my God, she's going to plug herself, but she hates this guy, and he presumably hates her too.
Yeah.
It just seemed like a big wrench in the gears there, but then we have one of the best scenes of the entire episode where Caroline, their mother, approaches Logan's mistress, Carrie, who I was hoping we'd see, and asks her to come sit with them, then grabs a woman named Sally Ann, who it turns out was Caroline's Carrie, and introduces her to Marcia as her Carrie, so to speak, and all the wives and mistresses sit together in the front row.
Huzzah.
This was brilliantly done.
It was a touching moment there when Marcia just kind of like
really was
gives a little bit of has some compassion, has a little bit of empathy for Carrie.
Yeah, it's like now that he's gone, the fight between them all for him can stop, right? And Carolyn says, God, Logan would hate this. And Marcia's like, at least he won't grind his teeth tonight, which they can all laugh at because they've all slept with him. and she takes Carrie's hand. It is a really warm moment, and it's one of the warmer moments of the entire episode where you feel like these four women, in some ways, have been freed of Logan, right? And now they can actually come together a little bit instead of having to be at each other's throats. So Greg weasels his way into Tom's spot as front right wheelman opposite his grandpa Ewan, and they bring in the casket. And then when the priest asks the audience to please be seated for a word from those who knew and loved Logan best, Roman, prepares to do his thing, but Ewan, Logan's brother, Greg's grandpa, who you will famously remember from Babe, Pig in the City, who Roman asked Greg to keep away from the microphone, he basically forces his way on stage.
Shouts to Big Jim Cromwell.
Yeah, and Greg tries to stop him. Shiv joins in to try to stop him. Ewan ignores both of them. And he begins his speech by questioning what sort of people would stop a brother speaking for the sake of a share price. Yeah. And that's when you knew this whole thing was going to be golden.
Yes, that sets the tone. And really, I think that line just kind of that says exactly what I'm saying about the whole scene.
Encapsulates the whole situation.
Yes.
Absolutely. He says, "It's not for me to judge my brother. History will tell that story," which lets you know both how impactful his brother was and also probably how terrible he was, right? Which he gets into a little bit. He delves into how they came across the first time during the war for their safety, which also serves as the beginning of the derailment of Roman's eulogy, as we saw him practicing talking about that aspect of his dad at the beginning of the episode. So it's when it first occurred to me, oh my God, this dude doing what he's doing right now, Ewan, this is going to be what sets off the Roman implosion. And he gets into how Logan was sent away by their uncle to go to a better school, but he hated the school, so he left and he came back under his own steam. But when he got back, their little sister contracted polio and died. And this is something that has been referenced throughout the series indirectly, without ever actually saying what it was. But it turns out Logan blamed himself. He thought he brought the polio back with him. And as Ewan says, their aunt and uncle did nothing to disabuse him of that notion. So essentially, he carried it with him the rest of his life. And we get a little insight here into how the monster that was Logan Roy was born, right? He's got all this trauma that we're watching actively be unfolded and passed on to his kids, right? That the poison dripped through. Well, it turns out he wasn't the beginning of that poison, that there was stuff that was done to him and things that he had to carry that turned him into the broken monster that he was, which is often the case. And the thing that the older I get, the more I learn about people. You want to be angry at someone and blame them for the way that they are. Well, there's typically somebody else whose fault that is. And it's kind of one of the sick things about generational trauma, which is one of the large focal points of this show. And we get a shot of Roman absorbing Ewan's eulogy, and you can see that he's rattled, from the truth about his father and imagining himself having to follow up what Ewan is saying.
Yeah, there's this, and I would describe both Ewan's eulogy as well as Kendall's this way, but there's kind of this stream of consciousness, bebop poetry aspect to it.
Definitely with Kendall's,
where what some of what they're saying is almost like nonsense, or at least is the syntax, the diction, the word choice is all very just kind of it doesn't flow all that well.
You want me to give you one of the parts you're talking about?
Yeah.
When Ewan says, "He darkened the skies, closed men's hearts, fed that dark flame in men, the hard, mean, hard, relenting flame that keeps their hearts warm while another grows cold, their grain stashed while another grows hungry." And you're just kind of like, what?
Yeah.
There is deep meaning to what he says. And then I think, to your point, the parallels between his little sort of poetry-esque rant here, which is planned, versus Kendall's, which is unplanned, off the top, and I think much more nonsensical.
Yes,
was intentional. I think,
but they both just kind of have this rhythm to it, where it's this is not poetry. This is not a speech that has been honed and crafted and workshopped and right. It's very. Ewan has notes or whatever, but this is from the heart. It's kind of off the cuff a little bit. It's just it
hasn't been edited by someone else. He didn't bring in a ghostwriter,
right? He says he uses the same adjectives a couple of times, here and there, are kind of back to back in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that nature of it, the fact that it's kind of I don't know if spacey is the right word, but the kind of the way that it kind of flits and floats around, but is really impactful, almost because of its kind of weirdness or whatever you want to call it.
And it's truth too, yeah.
Like, I think that the whole, just the way that it sounds, it is part of what gets to Roman as well.
I think so.
Because it's not just a brother getting up there and like, saying some sad things or even some true things or even some mean things about a brother. It's like, it's 6'4" Ewan up there, fire and brimstoning with all like this crazy speech. And I think I think that's part, because the reason I'm talking this through is because I was kind of trying to figure out like, what exactly is it that shakes Roman? And first he's thrown off course. Like if he's
the plan has been disrupted.
The plan has been disrupted, and so what's the famous line? It's like everybody loves a plan until you get like punched in the face or something like that.
Yeah.
That I think
Shiv uses it earlier this season.
Earlier in the season, and so it's like if he can just get up there and start, the facade is intact,
and he can set the tone.
He can set the tone, but this kind of like breaks through that a little bit.
It destroys that. Yeah.
And I just think that I feel like the way that Ewan delivers this speech is a piece of what just kind of like unsettles Roman.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, to me, it was the way that this throws off the plan, but also just the brutal, raw honesty with which he delivers this entire thing, where it's
which Romans is not going to have. Romans is not going to have any honesty.
No,
right? It's not going to have any real oomph to it. It's not going to have any vim.
Yeah, he was going to do what people typically do at funerals, right? That's the thing. You don't know at funerals. Sometimes you get the version where everybody goes up and just paints the person who passed away in as light of a light, like as good of a light as possible.
Right.
But sometimes you get a family member up there who's like, fuck all this fakeness. I'm going to be real with it and talk about this human as they were.
Yep.
And in this case, you're starting off with an estranged brother of the deceased just eviscerating Logan Roy, right? I mean, he says that he gave away a few million of his billions, but he was not a generous man. He was mean. He made but a mean estimation of the world, and he fed a certain kind of eagerness in men because he had a meagerness about himself. And he even goes so, like, the part of it that was even more rattling, I think, is when he questions him. Oh, he's like, and maybe I have that too.
Yeah.
Maybe I do, but I try. And he closes by saying he doesn't know when, but at some point Logan decided not to try anymore and that it was a terrible shame. And it really just frames up beautifully, but also in a very sad way, the entire essence of what Logan Roy was, that he was this brutal, powerful, intelligent, driven human, but he was also broken, and he took advantage of the meagerness of men, right? And that he sort of sowed discontent wherever he went, sort of thing. I mean, it was like, I felt like it was justice in a way. Like, I was kind of like, fuck yeah, Ewan, let's go, dude. Because like you said, Roman would have just gotten up there and done the whole bullshitty thing.
Yeah.
So Ewan steps down from the altar, and it's Roman's turn to get up there and speak. And when Ewan sits down next to Greg tells him, that was a good hard take you gave.
I love that.
Dude, you can see Greg playing every angle, right?
Yes,
right? Staying good with your grandpa, because you don't know, this shit may fall apart now here, son. You gotta have another option. Roman's eulogy does not go well. On the way up to the altar, Frank asks him, "Are you okay, son?" And Roman's like, yeah, pre-grieved. Not your son. And he gets up there, he fumbles his note cards, he tries to arrange them on the podium, and he begins his speech with a voice that can only be described as childish.
Yeah.
He goes from this puffed up big man in the mirror back at his place to being a little broken boy.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was tough to watch. He barely makes it through one sentence before looking over at the coffin, and that's when the wheels come off the cart. He asks his siblings to come up. I was like, oh God, what is he doing? Then he just starts weeping. He just breaks. He asks if Logan is in the coffin. He says, can we get him out?
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, it wasn't real for this dude this whole time. This is another piece of it that happened when Ewan was speaking. I think it finally became concrete in Roman's mind that his reality is that his father is indeed actually gone, that he is in that box right there.
Credit to Kieran Culkin here, because after an episode and a half where Roman just absolutely reminds you that he's the worst, I mean, I was full of empathy for him. I felt awful for him. I think I even like teared up watching him deliver that, like, can we get him out line?
Yeah, dude, that was tough.
It's really, really tough. And I think that kind of like what you said about, you have people and they are the way they are, and a lot of that comes from something that they grew up with or how they were treated. And like we see this play out in the end of the episode, but I think Roman as kind of I always want to think that he's the youngest. Have to remind myself that Shiv is actually the youngest. But Roman's place in the family is kind of like the youngest boy at the very least, and kind of like he was
a punching bag, man.
Yeah, and just the kind of the punching bag of the family. Like he was so shaped by the way that they grew up and the things that happened to him and the way that his dad and his siblings treated him. And to watch him be the one that is like the biggest champion for his dad in the end, it's just all so heartbreaking, because that like every little piece of the puzzle is there for a reason, and like it's all just spilling out now. And Shiv and Kendall are just better equipped and better practiced at just kind of resolving and stoning themselves to not let things in or to not let things back out. And Roman can't do it. And so it's like the fact that he's able to show the emotion, or that it pours out at all, is like, you almost kind of appreciate it in a way, because none of them can actually do that.
Well, I think the dam breaks. I mean, he had the most severe version of Stockholm Syndrome of the three. Mm-hmm. And I think Shiv and Kendall are a lot more honest with themselves about what their father was, whereas Roman is such a beaten, abused little puppy dog that all he can do is side with his master.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was an amazing performance from Kieran Culkin. It's so conflicting to me, because I hate this character so much, and yet Kieran deserves an award for portraying him. Like, fans are up in arms, like, oh, he's going to get an Emmy. Kieran Culkin is going to get an Emmy, and he very well might. He has been, like we've said repeatedly this season, one of the most improved players by far. Like, this guy is crushing it. I mean, I think he's like, it's one of those weird situations where you always think like Macaulay Culkin would obviously be the most famous Culkin. And maybe he still is, because Home Alone is tough to beat. But this is crazy, the breakthrough performance he's having here.
Yeah.
And it turns out pre-grieving, not a thing.
Not a thing, yeah.
Not a thing.
That is true.
I thought they did a beautiful job after the episode discussing like this is often the way human beings react to death. You initially have this loss and you don't feel it. You feel almost numb to it.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, okay, maybe I'm good. And then all of a sudden, at an unexpected point, it washes over you and you're broken by it.
Yeah.
And that was certainly what happened here with old Roman. He also failed to participate in both the Living Plus presentation and the eulogy.
Yes.
And I think him not doing this eulogy and breaking down emotionally up there in front of all these powerful people likely severed his relationship with Mencken as well. I got the impression that Mencken was like, and that is not my guy.
Yep.
Right?
That's definitely part of it.
Which is not good for Rome in terms of his professional career, which frankly he does not deserve to have. So Kendall is forced to go up there and attempt to fill in for Roman, and he starts off at first being like, I've got these words for my brother, and like you can tell he's like, okay, I'll just piece together these note cards that Roman had.
Right.
He even has like a pen. He's like, I'll just quickly I'll distract and talk while I jot down, and he's like, oh, fuck it. And he begins, I don't know how much I know, but I knew my father. And he acknowledges a lot of truths about his father. Frankly, if the goal was to take what Ewan did and spin it and tell the other side, as they kept saying, Kendall did a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
Because he acknowledges that his dad was a brute and that what his uncle Ewan said was true, but he credits him for building and being a man of action, essentially. And by the end of it, you're like, oh my God, Kendall speaks of his father like his father was God. And I thought that was a very cool representation of the way Logan's presence loomed over his children, because Kendall says, like, look at it, the lives and the livings. This was where he got into a lot of nonsense here. He said a bunch of shit that you're like, I don't even think that sentence made sense. That didn't.
What is it? The blood force, the life force.
Look at the
money.
things he made. The corpuscles.
Yes, the money, the
corpuscles of life gushing around this nation, this world. And he gets into like the buildings he made stand of ships, steel holes, amusements, newspapers, shows, and films, and life. Bloody, complicated life. He made life happen. He made me and my 3 siblings. And yes, he had a terrible force to him and a fierce ambition that could push you to the side. But it was only that human thing. The will to be, and to be seen, and to do. It was almost Shakespearean.
Very much so.
just like in the way where sometimes, I mean, almost biblical in a way too, where sometimes you read the Bible or Shakespeare and you'll get through a paragraph and be like, I don't have a fucking clue what was just said. That was all nonsense words. What the hell was that?
I appreciated it though, because like as flowery as some of this was, he ends the speech and you know what he's saying. You know what he's talking about, despite all of the craziness of the blood force and the corpuscles and the what
the gushing,
and the gushing and the life and the buildings and the steel holes and all of that.
Yeah.
You understand what he's saying, that Logan's sheer will of making things happen and all of those things creating ecosystems and economies around them is a powerful, amazing, awe-inspiring thing.
He was a force.
Even if there is a shitload of downside to it, right? It's like looking back at I brought up empires at the beginning of this thing. It's like you look at like Alexander the Great or any of the, historical figures, conquerors like that, like unbelievable people that achieved like kind of like just wild, unimaginable feats. Mostly bad people.
Mostly monstrous, yeah.
That did awful things.
Yeah, there's one in particular that stands out. Hitler. Terrible, terrible person. But if you wanted to make a speech like this about Hitler, say, oh, he did a lot of different stuff. I can recall that Kanye West recently tried to. You could make that speech. It wouldn't be morally sound. And that's where, like, at the end of it, no matter what, it's basically Kendall spews out a bunch of capitalism porn here. Like, he's like,
it's true. Yeah.
And they even give you a shot of both Mattson and Mencken looking aroused. Like they're
they're
like,
into
oh,
it.
Fuck yeah, this is fucking that's fucking hard.
Yeah, when he turns and acknowledges the money of it all, that definitely gets some people in this particular audience going.
It does. He closes with, and there wasn't a room from the grandest stateroom where his advice was sought to the lowest house where his news was played, where he couldn't walk and wasn't comfortable. He was comfortable with this world, and he knew it, and he liked it. And I say, amen to that. And the entire church applauds.
Yeah.
Like as nonsensical as it may have been, there was the overall message was essentially my father was a brute force of human nature.
Yeah.
Right? He was, never says like he was a great guy, but he did a lot. And he was crazy good at being who he was, right? Yes. Then Shiv takes the stage and does her own eulogy as well. And just the part of it that really stuck with me was like when she says, "You did okay, Dad." Like she looks at the coffin and speaks to it directly, and she's like, "We're all here, and we're doing okay. We're doing okay." She says, "So goodbye, my dear, dear world of a father." And it kind of it also reminded me of this notion that we can all have as children of our parents. Especially when you're a small child, your parents are your world. They're everything to you. They are godlike in many, many ways, especially when you're a small child. Now, you're supposed to grow out of this because they're supposed to let you and even help you. But with these kids, that's not the way Logan handled parenting. He remained their world until his death. And now, as a result, with him removed, they're all fucked and broken. And this show says so much about so many different things on so many different levels. Like where I'm watching Kendall's speech and I'm like, oh yeah, Kendall is crushing this from the perspective of he needs to mop up the mess that Roman and Ewan have created.
Yeah.
But then from the perspective of being truthful about what his father did to him and his family, he's not really.
Yeah.
He's achieving goals for his professional life, but what does that say about him as a person?
Yeah, for us as an audience, I thought it was a nice just kind of like summation of Logan as well, just to watch these three speeches, because all of them get up there and say at least one positive thing, right? And yet all three are also compelled to mention dark sides of him.
Yeah.
Now they frame it in different ways. They shine different lights on it. But the three that get up there, it's like they especially with Kendall and then even more so with Shiv, they want to get up and say something really positive. But it's kind of like when they have those final conversations where they're talking into his maybe listening ear.
Right.
it's like, I love you, but also, hey, gotta remind you that you were pretty shitty sometimes too.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting because it's like you said about how at a lot of funerals, probably most, you don't get a lot of the raw honesty. People want to remember the good things about you. And so if you end up there in the coffin or the urn or whatever, and people just can't help but to remind everybody sitting there about the bad stuff too, there was probably a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think you just brought up something I hadn't considered. Though the moments where Tom is third person holding the phone up to the ear of, potentially dead already Logan Roy, so that these kids can all talk to him, Kendall and Shiv both do what you just said, where Kendall is like, I can't forgive you, right? Shiv brings up like, you were pretty shitty to me. I can't believe you were the way you were. Roman can't really bring himself to do that. Just like he can't even bring himself to speak at this thing. And it was just a great parallel there between that moment at Connor's wedding where they're all finding out that this man is gone and this moment at the funeral where they're all delivering a eulogy. What did you make of Shiv even taking the podium at all? Because clearly that wasn't planned.
That was impromptu as well, yeah. I think everybody that gets up, I think after all three speeches, let's call Roman's a speech as well, short as it was, I just think she can't not get up there and say something and attempt, like, get one maybe final attempt at a sense of closure.
I think it was that, and then the other layer I think was that this all, to your earlier point, this whole thing is a move. Politicking. Yeah. It's all move making.
So she needs to be seen.
She's got to be seen up there making her statements too. Yeah. And it was like, she's trying to become the American CEO for Mattson. She's got to get up there, and she can't just let Kendall have been the one who dominated it. She's got to go try to do her thing. So
great
there was a lot of that was really, again, like you said, kind of disgusting, where you're just like, oh man, these fuckers can't stop. They don't know when to turn it off. Perhaps they never can. Today's episode is also brought to you by you, our listeners, supporting us directly in exchange for ad-free bonus coverage of Succession on patreon.com/oystersclamscockles. Subscribe on patreon.com/oystersclamscockles for as little as $5 a month. Support our show and enjoy so much more exclusive OCC content ad-free. When you join, you will immediately gain access to our entire backlog of episodes, including the 8 hotline call-driven episodes of Succession bonus coverage that already exist there for you to enjoy right when you sign up. Plus, later this week, you'll get another one, and then, of course, next week, the finale's bonus coverage episode as well when it drops. Also, you'll get the bonus coverage for season 1 of The Last of Us, Season 1 of House of the Dragon, and Season 2 of The White Lotus, and you'll gain access to our entire companion podcast for HBO's classic crime drama, The Sopranos, friendly to both first-timers and rewatchers, and that's, again, on top of everything you get in terms of bonus coverage of Succession's final season. A ton of stuff immediately when you sign up on patreon.com/oystersclamscockles. Go today, support our show for as little as $5 a month in exchange for so much more premium ad-free OCC. Go now, please and thank you. On his way out of the church, Mencken tells Kendall that was perfect in regard to his speech about his father. And you can tell that he's looking at Kendall as the guy now, I think. It's not Roman anymore. Roman is kind of in a corner, like, just broken. Then Hugo approaches Kendall and tells him that he had a very interesting conversation with Ebba, who is now leaking info to Hugo, which is wild.
Now she's the double agent over on the other side.
Yes, and she has informed him that Shiv floated a U.S. CEO to placate Mencken, and you can tell Kendall is not pleased with that. Then it is off to the burial ground, or multi-million-dollar tomb, I should say, which was a .com pet supply guy who built it, but the guy decided against it, so Logan won it in a bidding war with Stalin and Liberace, as Shiv jokes, because he didn't want to go in the ground. He didn't feel good about that, Connor says.
$5 million. Pretty good deal.
Yeah, $5 million all in, but that's forever, obviously, Barrett. Yeah. It's forever.
Right.
Cat food Ozymandias was a great joke from Shiv. Roman cannot bring himself to enter this tomb, but the other 3 siblings do, where they find 4 extra coffin slots. Connor says he wouldn't say no to a top bunk, and this was, look, you always see these when you drive past a graveyard, right? Mm-hmm. The massive, like, residential crypt tomb thing where you're just like, who the fuck is that guy?
Yeah.
Well, now you know. It's a Logan Roy type.
Yeah.
No, not always, obviously. But I did think it was interesting that they had him set up in one of these and that nobody knew. Also, by the way, if I assume Connor, just the 4 kids, right? Nobody else. Because there was only 4. I don't think he had any.
I think it's whoever chooses.
Yeah.
You know, whoever wants to. I mean,
what if they all remain empty? That's just so much more sad, right?
Well, they probably will. Don't these people want to be buried with their wives and their families and their
Connor
whoever's?
says he just got to talk to Willow. He wants that top bunk,
well,
baby.
Maybe Willow's going to slot in right beneath him.
Yeah,
you know?
That's true.
Second from the top.
Roman can't even watch himself. Or he cannot even bring himself to watch them bring the coffin into the tomb. He bounces, and Shiv kind of gets up.
I liked his note, like interesting note there, where he said where they're kind of talking about their dad, and he says, "I always breathed funny around him."
Yeah, he made me breathe funny. Because Kendall says I couldn't even finish a scotch with the guy. Now you want me to be stuck in this tomb with him for all of eternity. Shiv gets up and she's kind of, she's clearly just this moment of bringing in his body to this place, his final resting place, has her feeling some kind of way. Because she goes to Frank and Carl and she asks directly, "How bad was Dad?" And Frank says, "He was a salty dog, but he was a good egg." Just a great 2 lines there. That'd be good to stick on a tombstone. Salty dog, but he was a good egg. And then Carl says, "What you saw was what you got." And then Shiv's like, "Okay, well, that'll do." You can. It's like she was looking for some level of reassurance.
Yeah.
About the man her father was.
That he wasn't
right?
that terrible of a guy. Yeah.
Right. And then this is all they can give her. But it seems like it's enough. She does walk away looking a little more chipper than she was walking up.
We talk about Sarah Snook's face acting quite a bit because she is able to just put all sorts of stuff on her face as far as expressions and eyebrow raises and smirks and all the other ones.
A lot of depth to her facial acting.
All the other ones that are out there, all of the other expressions that you can make with your face. She gave many throughout the course of this episode that I was having trouble interpreting or reading.
What's that supposed to mean about what she's thinking?
Yes.
Yeah, this was one of those moments for
me.
And
this was kind of one of those moments.
I was like, what was it? What is she? It's like she's coming to terms with the monster that was Logan Roy. Several of the others were
when they pan to her and get a reaction shot for her listening to Kendall's eulogy.
Yeah.
I could not tell what she was what she was thinking. What she was thinking.
No, I was
what
right
I was
there with
to
you.
Read there. So.
I was right there with you. Where I was, because I think for one of them where she looks over kind of concerned, I thought she was upset that her brother was trying to say I hope I'm like Logan, because he says Kendall says I hope to God I have some of him in me.
Yeah.
And that's when they show Shiv Jesus, fuck, really? That's what you hope? You hope you have some of that guy in you?
Yeah.
And she's looking over at his wives, right? And mistresses. And one of them says, I think it was Shiv, says gets up there and says he had
he was hard on women.
Yeah, hard on women. He was not able to fit whole woman in his brain.
And we talked quite a bit about that on this last Thursday's Patreon episode about just the way that females are often just kind of thrown under the bus in this series, and Shiv especially has kind of been through it the last few episodes. So I thought that was very, just to kind of toss it back to the eulogies for a second.
Yeah.
Important that she recognized how women were pretty unfairly treated in the world of Logan Roy, whether that was through his own personal relationships or in a professional setting as well, I think.
Yeah, and I did think it was a brilliant episode all around from Shiv for the reasons that you just went through. I was again completely agree with you. I was very much. I wanted to pause each of those looks and give myself enough time to think through what it was that was going through her brain. Right. Marcia then approaches Shiv, asks if she's okay, and then says, "I loved him very much. I miss him very much. He broke my heart, and he broke your hearts too." Yeah. As Marcia's acknowledging, everybody got jacked up by this guy.
Yeah, and I think I liked that line too, because I think it was basically look, you can love somebody and miss them and be grieving intensely for them, and also acknowledge that they did fucked up stuff and hurt you really badly.
Absolutely, yeah. Kendall then approaches Hugo, tells him he wants Hugo to brief media on background, and Hugo says, "Then I am the droid you are looking for," which is a Star Wars joke. and lets you know Hugo's a little bit of a dork. Kendall tells him to say that Matsson's acquisition doesn't have the support of key members of the family, that they're souring on the deal, that the premium is too low, and then says point blank, this is an explicit plan to fuck the deal. Me rule the world. And you can come, but it won't be a collaboration, okay? You'll be my dog. But the scraps from the table will be millions. Millions. Happy? And Hugo's response is, woof woof. And then cue extremely ominous music. They brought in, this hit hard where he's walking away from Hugo and it's playing you like almost like whatever this Kendall's theme for the remainder of the one episode we have left, I guess. But it was heavy. And then back in what I think is now Connor and Willa's penthouse, it was Logan's former residence is where they go after this, I think.
Yeah.
They had Kendall approach Logan's best pal, Colin. This was a weird scene where he's like, I know you've been seeing a head shrinker, a psychiatrist, and you need to come work for me, talk to me, instead of your shrink. Mm-hmm. And Colin's like, okay, this is weird. Yeah. It's very strange. And next, Ken goes for Mencken. He basically attempts to imply that Mencken and him are partners, and Mencken needs to do something about regulatory and the Gojo deal, and Mencken does not go for this. Greg interrupts. And then Roman interrupts Greg, and then Mencken rips Roman for crying and melting down at the funeral, and then Connor interrupts to grab 5. It's copacetic, it's cool, to talk about macro Slovenia micro travel budget. He wants more money. And Shiv then interrupts everyone and says that she is Mencken's extraction team and takes him to talk to Mr. Matsson. And Mencken walks up with her and says, okay, well, look at us, a blonde, a redhead, and a brunette walk into the bar. Liberal, conservative, and what's your philosophy exactly? And Matsson has a phenomenal reply. Privacy, pussy, pasta, as he sips at his beer.
Which is what he says in the Kendall's birthday party episode last season. That's, and because Shiv even goes like, what's your thing again? Like, remind me of your 3 Ps or whatever. And and he says it, because that's what he says. That's the second time that he's used that line.
We might have to make that a t-shirt. Yeah. Matsson tells Mencken he wants Waystar, he really likes the deal, and obviously he knows that Mencken needs to feel comfortable for the deal to work. So Mencken brings up the regulatory stuff almost to be like, so what can you do for me? And Matsson counters by offering up the American CEO, which Mencken quickly picks up on would be Shiv, right? And he says, I thought you hated me, basically. But Shiv says she's flexible like her dad was flexible. Quote, our audience loves Jared, and so I respect our audience, which was just another moment where you're like, all right, Shiv, making the move. That was what you needed to say. And then on the other side, you're like, oh, Shiv, selling out all of your beliefs and ideals, you sad, strange little woman. Tom shows up and reminds us all that he is very, very tired. He and Shiv talk. They both have a glass of champagne, which she does actually sip on, and we've been reminded by many, many women on TikTok comments over the last several weeks that you can, in fact, drink one glass of wine or have a glass of champagne. It's not like having one glass kills the baby inside of you.
No. Yeah. We understand. We definitely understand.
We know that. We're aware. All right. Just because we haven't commented on it directly doesn't mean we're not aware of that. We're old enough to know that at this point. He and Shiv, Tom apologizes to her for not being at the funeral, but says he's been awake for so long he couldn't leave, and then reminds her that he had said goodbye to Logan already when he was on the plane with him, that he was the first one up there with him when he died, and that he said goodbye in his own way. And this kind of causes him to just finally, just like Roman broke at the funeral, he has a little breakdown here where he starts crying, and you can tell Shiv feels genuinely bad for him. It's almost like Tom was waiting for someone to send him home. Tell him that he could leave the office and let go, right? And she gives him that permission to go to their apartment and to sleep. He's been staying at a hotel to the extent that everyone at the hotel now knows him, and he fucking hates that because it makes him sad.
The Tom Shiv relationship, it was down for the count. It had been pinned and gotten a 3 count, hit in the head with a chair.
Yes.
Launched off the top ropes, crashed through a table. And here it is, The Undertaker. Cue The Undertaker gif. Rising again.
Yes.
Comeback of the century. It's going to happen. This is going to happen.
It's going to happen.
They're coming back from this.
We were right with our original take.
There is nothing that can tear these two down completely and fully. They can say the worst stuff to each other. They can go in the bag that we talked about that none of you normal people out there should ever go into. Do not reach into that bag. You will not survive it because you're not crazy billionaire top 0.001 percenters.
You're not sociopathic enough.
Like these two crazies. And kind of seems like they're going to make it work.
Yeah, I think they are, and it really makes you feel for their child, which, again, I thought the episode was definitely focusing on, like, the continuation of generational trauma, like how it continues on, how the poison continues to drip through. Like, that was hit on time and again with each of the kids, and especially with Shiv being pregnant and with their conversations with Carolyn. I think we have one more left. Do we have another one?
Well, she walks up right here, right?
Oh, tells them, like, basically, congratulations, and he's like, yeah, it'd be great if it wasn't the fucking worst thing on earth, a total disaster.
Yeah, I feel like, and Tom kind of alludes to this a little bit too here in this scene once Caroline walks away, but you probably have it in your mind that Logan is like 80% responsible for the way that the kids are. Kind of think Mom might be closer to like 40% than 20.
Yeah, she sucked too.
She is. I mean, really, really like the things that she delivers are devastating in like a completely different way.
In a cold British way.
In a very cold way. Like Logan is more like fuck you up with the mind games and the like all of that. Like Caroline is like, I should be a warm, loving mother, and yet I am a stone cold, unfeeling,
bitch. Yeah.
It's bad. It's bad.
Yeah.
Poor Shiv.
It makes you every time that you get a little glimpse,
especially with Shiv, especially with the mother-daughter thing that's going on there. There's like,
well, and you'll recall, like when Tom dropped that line on Shiv a couple episodes ago that I maybe think you are not fit to be a mother.
Yeah.
Carolyn told Shiv that a couple seasons ago,
right?
You should just have dogs.
Yeah.
Which, in all fairness, we also saw how that turned out. Mondale's stuck in this fucking pen.
In his little pen.
She's not even a good dog owner. Shiv then gets a call from Matsson telling her it is a yes from Mencken, which really surprised me. But Matsson says they think they're interested, and he says he thinks he can make a U.S. CEO work. Essentially, a celebratory call between him and Shiv. She says, let's make a meatball burger, and it seems to be all systems go.
Because he's Swedish and she's American.
Yeah, and I thought this was obviously frustrating for us as viewers, but also just kind of supposed to make a point here that like everything that happened last episode was just so Roman and Kendall could preserve their ownership of Waystar, and Mencken took less than a full 24 hours to walk away from that.
Yeah.
Like these deals that get promised and this like word of mouth shit, it can all fall apart in an instance or in, one failed eulogy where that seemed like that was it. Like that Mencken read these two guys and was like, nah.
Well, and he's also, Kendall goes on to explain this, that they've lost leverage.
They got nothing left to promise him, right?
Yeah, and in a way, by calling the election for him, they actually don't have any other cards to. That was kind of their only card to play.
Think about it from the other angle that the audience is all in on Mencken.
Yeah,
and that, like they showed us last week, if they do anything anti-Mencken, they're going to lose the whole audience. I mean, we saw this play out in a pretty distinct way with Trump.
This piece of it actually might like mirror Trump more than any other piece of like the news, the like cable news or the election that we just saw. Like this piece of it right here, I think actually is potentially like the bigger parallel.
Right, where
that's exactly
what
you're saying.
They thought that he was their guy, right? And then it turns out in the end, like how did Kendall put it? He's like, he's got our dick in his hands and we should have his dick in our hand.
Yeah, but they do not.
But the shoe was on the other foot and the entire thing sort of backfires where you could see how the same thing would have played out in real life with Fox and Trump too, where it's like, oh, this guy, we're going to empower him, but also then he'll be beholden to us. And then in the end, it was actually them that were completely beholden to him and his whims and wishes. And that's what we see unfold here with Mencken, where, like you said, there's no more leverage for them.
Yeah.
They've given him the keys to the kingdom, and now he doesn't really need them as much as they need him, because if they turn off his audience, they've got other options. with AVN and whatever the other one was. Like, they can go elsewhere.
2 other networks, and then I think Matsson's pitch to him, which is basically like, hey, you want big tech data stuff that I can bring that can like
help you with even more power?
Right, which is way more powerful than like one delivery system of messaging on a cable news network.
Right.
Like, it's kind of the super scary thing of like, hey, do you want us to Facebook this thing?
Right, exactly.
Or do you want us to Fox News this thing?
Yeah, it kind of ties in that whole, both of those issues that we faced recently in this country, right? Where we've seen both of those things play out in a way that was not great in terms of just preserving democracy, right? So, yeah, very cool how they inserted all that. And Kendall then goes and tells Roman that he needs Roman's help because Lucas and Shiv might have an accommodation with Mencken. I love how quickly things are leaking to everybody, by the way.
Yep.
Roman protests, saying, like, no, I made a deal with Mencken. And also, I don't feel very good right now. And Kendall's like, oh, yeah, you don't feel very good right now because you fucked it. And he finally is honest with his little brother here about, like, what he has done. And Roman slowly starts to realize that he did, in fact, fuck it.
So what exactly did Roman fuck?
He went all in on Mencken with absolutely no strategy for what would happen after the fact.
All right.
Like, how would they maintain their leverage?
I was confused for about 5 minutes after the episode because I thought that I heard Kendall say, you fucked it with Jerry, but he actually said, you fucked it with Jared.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay. So really what he's saying is that exactly what you just said is that he fully committed to this play without actually having like steps two through 5.
Yes.
Figured out.
And now we're screwed.
And then also I think that that he needed that for Roman's thing to be worth anything, he needed to be little like pocket pool buddies with Mencken.
Yes.
He needed to have this little weird relationship with them, and he has now lost that by showing emotion and
melting down.
And melting down at the funeral in a way. So that all became a little bit more clear. But you make a good point, and I think it's the right one that like you pushed this narrative, you pushed this play, this move that we were going to make with the Mencken thing, and you did not think about our next pieces of the strategy.
Yeah, like essentially it didn't work at all.
It didn't work.
Also, you just brought up like the emotion thing. There's a similar storyline in The Sopranos where one of the mob bosses cries in public. Mm-hmm. And then for the remainder of the series, it is brought up.
Yeah.
They're like, he's a weepy little bitch. Like, this guy cries. He's not strong. The implication being that, of course, like amongst the circles of the most powerful men on earth, crying is not accepted.
Right.
Showing emotion is not accepted, which historically has very much been a thing, right? Yep. It's probably less and less each day, but that is the other piece of it. I think Roman lost entirely, like I said earlier. His entire relationship with Mencken fell apart the second he started crying up there. And Kendall says he has a plan, but he's going to need Roman to help him. And he closes with, you fucked it, but it's all right. And then Carl is playing audio of Roman at the funeral for Frank and Jerry, which I think was ironic just because it's like earlier this season we saw a clip of Carrie going around and everybody's roasting Carrie, Roman being one of them. And then here there's a clip now of Roman going around. He's going to lose all his power, basically.
The Kendall, as we talked about the kids revealing themselves to be very Logan-esque and different facets and through different things that they say or do. This scene right here, this scene where Kendall tells Roman that he fucked it, extremely Logan, and I think it even mirrors a season 1 episode where after Kendall makes the play to sell to Stewie, basically, Logan basically does the exact same thing to Kendall, where he's like, "You fucked it, you blew this."
Yeah.
And it's once again, it's the poison dripping through. It's the way that all of these people have learned to treat each other, and it's upsetting. It's sad.
In the transformation of Kendall becoming the most like his father out of any of these kids, I think too. So after his brother destroys his entire self-esteem, Roman heads outside where it's getting a little Tiananmen, as Tom puts it. And he purposefully engages the protesters in a masochistic act that brings him the physical abuse that his father once doled out.
Yes.
He walks through the crowd, calling people morons, saying they have no fucking idea, calling them idiots, stupid fuckers, and he finally takes a shot in the face, gets knocked to the ground, gets sort of trampled by the crowd, then gets up and just walks like broken through the sea of people. I thought at first he was like, I was like, oh my God, is he going to die?
Yeah.
But then I was like,
100%.
wait a minute. Okay, that's too on the nose. You know what I mean? Like, oh, the sea of regular people like trampling the billionaire heir to death. No,
that maybe just chose the president.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But that being said, I still think I worry for Roman that he may kill himself. I don't know if he makes it out of the season alive.
Yeah, it was, much in the way that you thought Tom was going to throw himself off that roof.
Yeah.
I was getting that similar vibe here in this situation. Glad it didn't happen. Now, what I was getting, though, was big Joker vibes.
Oh, dude, hugely. That absolutely struck the same chord with me, where I was like, oh, this is like another transformation of sorts, right? Like he's being broken by the mob sort of down here. Like,
right. Yeah. They're doing Joker.
You're doing Joker right now. But no, I'm worried this kid isn't going to make it, man. I don't know what there is left for him. I really don't know. We'll have to wait and see next week. But yeah, it was just a very powerful ending scene with him being down there talking shit over the barricade, then actually going over it, getting into it with the people, getting trampled, and then as he's walking, it just like fades to black, roll credits.
Yeah.
An incredible episode. This was very, very well executed, well done. I loved, if you don't watch the inside the episode stuff, this was a great one, just because you get Jesse Armstrong speaking to some of the ways that this differed from other episodes of Succession, particularly that they used 4 cameras at this funeral where they typically do a 2-camera setup.
Yeah, that was Mark Mylod, the director, talking.
Oh, sorry, that was Mark.
But his insight into how they shot this was awesome. And I've listened to other people write about this, exactly what they're doing here, where they are able to, where they have, one, it's insane that they shoot on film. Nobody gets to do this. It's so expensive compared to shooting on digital, right?
It's for it's for the look of it though, right?
Yes, yes. But they have actual the rolls of film that fucking bolt onto these huge cameras, and they just roll the entire time. And when one goes out, they just slap another one on there, and they keep rolling. And so everything is shooting for the entire time, basically. And so they don't miss a thing. There's they're doing. They don't have to stop and reload for takes. It's just all happening at the whole time, and they're just capturing everything, and then they get to bring all that in.
And edit it
to the episode, and it's so awesome. It's one of the reasons I think why this show is so good.
It has to take a tremendous amount of work. I mean, the way he was describing this one, where essentially they did the take just they ran the funeral over and over
again,
did it 3 or 4 times. He was saying that usually they shoot pretty quickly, and that by comparison to other sets, this still may have been fairly quick, but for them it took a lot longer because they did the continuous take, and they did it multiple times, and they never stopped rolling, and they got as much footage of every single reaction and crowd shots and individual faces close up as they possibly could. So in terms of editing, that has to be just a mountain of work to sit there and deciding. If you've ever done any amount of video editing with multiple takes, the hardest thing is which of these 2 takes is better?
Oh, my God.
Which of these 2 things is better? Now, which of these 2 things is better? And they're doing that for hours and hours and hours of footage of all these different angles, of all these different actors executing these scenes. But it was brilliantly done, and it really worked out. It panned out. You can see the proof is in the pudding, but this one was great, man. I'm really excited to hear from everybody on the hotline this week on Patreon from the board members, the Oyster Clamco board. Make sure if you are a board member on Patreon, you are calling the hotline, getting your takes in as soon as possible, because I'm sure we are going to have a lot of them this week. Again, if you are looking for more coverage of Succession's final season, remember, we do an exclusive ad-free episode every week driven by hotline calls from our listeners, the Oyster Clamco board members, as we call them, on patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles. We would appreciate it if you'd support our sponsors by using our dedicated URLs and codes each week. That's how we pay the piper here at Oyster Clamco. Today we had Factor. Go to factormeals.com/OCC50 for 50% off your first box. That's code OCC50 at factormeals.com/OCC50 to get 50% off your first box. If you're an F1 fan, check out Bolin Media's premier F1 programming from Formula Bone at youtube.com/@FormulaBone. Speaking of YouTube, youtube.com/oysters, clams, cockles. We've got over 5,000 people watching our show each week instead of just listening. We appreciate y'all. Even if you're not interested in watching, please subscribe on youtube.com/@oysters, clams, cockles. It helps us out a lot. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at WRBOLEN. Mr. Dudley, where can they follow you?
Oh, catch me on Instagram, Twitter at Barrett Dudley.
And go to bolinmedia.com/shop to grab yourself some merch. got great merch. You're just going to have to take my word for it. Go check it out, bowlinmedia.com/shop. Barrett and I will be back on Thursday to further digest and discuss this episode on Patreon. But thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Until next time, fuck off.